we're gonna exit the strange things of Jesus and spend some time as we get to Easter looking at the suffering of Jesus. That's what's coming next. And so we'll probably stay here for another week or maybe two and then move on to some different aspects of Jesus. But today, again, the strange, a thing about Jesus that strikes me as strange, I guess, is kind of where we're at. And we're going to see that in Jonah. The other day, the three foster boys that we have, two of them came home from school and they had wrestling forms in their hands, wanting to get signed up to be able to go wrestling this year. And I was reminiscing back to when I was about their age, when my younger brother and I, we started wrestling. We were about that old, first grade, kindergarten, second grade. And I was remembering back, it's not so much when you just start, but as you progress in wrestling, eventually they do something that's called, you have to do something that they call in wrestling cutting weight or making weight. And what that is you get signed up to wrestle a certain weight bracket, and you've got to do what it takes to make sure that the day you go to the wrestling meet, that when you step on the scale, that's how much you weigh. And so I got to remembering back to when I was in junior high and some of the crazy things that I would do and some of the crazy things that my friends would do in order to make weight in 6th grade or 7th grade. The biggest for me was just the fact that not eating as much as I wanted to eat, which to me that was a lot. But the one meat that always sticks into my mind was around Valentine's Day. And we had a big Valentine's Day party at school. And I went to school and I had a meet that weekend. And all the kids that aren't in wrestling are celebrating Valentine's Day with all sorts of treats and candy. And I couldn't have any because I needed to make sure I made weight. And I had this little girlfriend who was in the grade below me. And she made me this giant heart Rice Krispie bar treat for Valentine's Day. And so I had that there in my locker, and I couldn't eat that either until the weekend. So that just had, and I remember, it just was so frustrating to me, but in order to make weight, that's what I would do. I would sacrifice that. But that wasn't as crazy as some of my other friends. They'd go to sleep with garbage bags on so that they would sweat enough during the night and lose that kind of moisture in their body so they could make weight. Some guys would bring a cup around everywhere they'd go, and they'd spit all day long to get that, instead of swallowing, they would get it out of their system to make weight. I mean, it's just crazy, the stuff that we would do to make weight. And then you go to the wrestling meet and you wear this thing that they call a singlet, which is just like men tights. And, I never thought through, this. And then you would wrestle other guys also wearing men tights. And you're this spectacle in the middle of a gym with everybody watching you wrestle. And you've got all of these coaches that are yelling at your opponent all sorts of moves to do, in order to clobber you on the mat. And then in your corner, there's Dad, whose only advice is, get off your back, son. Son, get off your back, and then, you have the humiliation of your dad yelling at the whole match, and then your mom's at the side videotaping the whole thing, right? So you get to go home and relive these memories. And you would think that after staring at the light bulb on the ceiling, match after match after match, a fellow would have decided to hang up the singlet and celebrate Valentine's Day, but the thing was, there was too much going on inside of me to do that. I wanted to make my coach proud. I had these coaches that I really looked up to, and I wanted to make them proud, so I'd put on the singlet, and I'd not eat the Rice Krispie bar, and, do what it took to make weight. I wanted to impress my parents, and they wouldn't have cared if I would have quit, but inside I wanted to impress my parents, and so I did what it took to, which it would have probably impressed them more if I had just eaten the Rice Krispie bar and not made the weight, so I didn't have to go through all that. I wanted to be somebody, thinking of wrestling, and so I worked and I fasted and I did what it took to make the weight. This desire to be somebody or to impress or to fit in didn't start with wrestling, and it didn't stop with wrestling. Okay, this desire to impress, this desire to be somebody to the people around me that were important to me, the desire to feel like I belong and fit in. And it didn't start with wrestling, didn't stop with wrestling. I just want to share, this is a little progression. Again, we got to see the way, in order to see how Jesus is strange, we've got to see what's normal. What's normal for people, for me, is that desire to fit into, and we can spend all morning talking about stories. I'm just going to share a couple. You see the progression. It started before this, but I remember in 5th grade, I don't know if they just came out. I don't think so. I think it was just the first time that guys my age started to realize that boxers were cooler than regular underwear. And so this guy in my class who came to school one day, and he had boxers on, and he was the first guy in our class to wear boxers. All the rest of us had regular underwear, and we thought, man, that is so cool. And so we're in the bathroom, and he's showing us his boxers. A week goes by, and we come to school again, and he's showing us his boxers again, and this time he's got flannel boxers. Just, whoa, So then, I went to a Christian school, and a couple weeks go by, and so the school was the basement of a chapel, and we were upstairs in the sanctuary doing something, and we were practicing for a musical of some kind. And so we had outlined the sanctuary, and I'm standing next to this guy's named Bryce, and I'm standing between Bryce and Adam. Bryce is the guy who's had the boxers now for a little while, and Adam's over here, and Adam goes, so I'm in the middle, and he goes, hey, Bryce. He takes down and shows him, and he's got boxers on, And so I'm in the middle thinking, man, I'm the only one here with regular underwear, So I went home, and I was trying to push my parents. The guys around me, they all got. So I remember finally I got these green shark boxers, and oh man, I just couldn't wait to show off. Right? What is the pastor? What kind of church am I at? I wanted to fit in, and it was silly things like boxers. I felt like I fit in if I was wearing it. And then you progress, right? 6th grade, these guys were wearing the pants that the JNCOs were in, and you could fit a small person in each of the back pockets of these pants, right? And they were just huge pants. That was in, and I had the tight hand-me-downs, that I wore, and all my friends. So I remember going and asking Mom and Dad, can I have a pair of cool pants, please, because I don't feel like I, didn't fit in with the deal there. You move up 7th grade, everybody's getting girlfriends, and so you're asking out any girl who's available if you go out. Now, doesn't matter if you like her or not, just everybody else has a girlfriend, so you're going around wanting to fit in. You try to get a girlfriend. 8th grade, we moved to Minnesota, and I wasn't going to the school with a lot of friends, so it was mostly just family, and I remember going with my dad to these men's breakfasts once a week, and always ordering coffee, always having my coffee black, even though I hated coffee, but everybody else was drinking coffee at the table. I wasn't going to be the little 8th grader who was asking for orange juice when everybody else was having their coffee. So I would drink coffee even though I didn't like it at all. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be somebody. I started hunting because that was something my dad was really into, and so we'd go out hunting, and I enjoyed it, but I was out there because I wanted to impress my dad. I wanted to be one with my dad, and so I remember I would even outdo my dad, because not in shooting deer, that's a whole different story, but in hunting, I remember even my first year, my dad would come in after dark, or at dark, and I would sit out there well past dark, even though you're not allowed to shoot deer, even though you can't see anything, but I thought, if I stay here longer than my dad, I'll impress my dad. Dad will think I'm somebody. He'll be proud of me for doing that. And so I'd do that. Later in high school, I started going to a Christian school, and the guys were into four-wheelers. And so I would buy four-wheeler magazines. Even though I've never owned a four-wheeler, I don't know that I've ever driven one by myself, maybe over Richards. I didn't care. I couldn't care less about four-wheelers. But I was memorizing terms and part names, and it didn't mean a thing to me. But if I could say the lingo around my friends, I'd fit in. I'd be one of the guys in college then. I moved to college, and my friends started getting into alcohol, and I went to this one bachelor party out in the woods, and it was just guys, and they brought a bunch of alcohol for this party. And I tell you, this is just pastor sharing with you, right? Being honest. Might be looking for another job eventually, but we went to this bachelor party, and these guys had alcohol, and so yeah, for sure, I'll have one of those. So I'd take one, and we're sitting in lawn chairs out in the middle of nowhere, and I would take it, and I'd put it up my mouth, but then if you stick your tongue in the hole, none of it goes down your throat. So I'd stick my tongue in the hole, and I'd pop it up and bring it down. And then when they weren't looking, I'd dump it behind my chair because I just didn't want to have any, but I wanted to fit in. They see my bottle going down and stick the tongue in, bring it up, put it back down, and ask for another one, ask for another. All my friends went to bed drunker and drunk, and I was as sober because I didn't have any alcohol, but I wanted to fit in, so I pretended like I was. It never stopped. Things just changed, right? I got into golf to impress my father-in-law because he likes to golf. I wanted to fit in with the family, so I got into golf. And I genuinely enjoy it now, but that's why I golfed in the first place, was because I wanted to impress somebody. When I moved to Nebraska, for those of you who were here and remember, I came wearing Nebraska Cornhusker stuff. Why? Because I like the Cornhuskers? No. Just wanted to fit in. I was moving to Nebraska. Do what it takes. Fit in. Be somebody. Be accepted. This desire to fit in or to be somebody is a common experience shared by the majority of the human race. It is possible, I don't know every human being, so it is possible that there are some human beings on planet Earth that don't have this desire to fit in, but my guess is that they have simply just suppressed that feeling over the years. My guess is every person that has ever walked the face of this earth has a desire to fit in or to be somebody, to be accepted. And here's an interesting thing that I believe is truth, the thought just came to me actually yesterday, and so I haven't studied it enough, but as I'm studying where this desire to fit in has come from, why? As again, you grow older and the things just change, right? You start caring about your lawn maybe instead of boxers. You start caring about the make of your minivan or your car or your house or whatever it is. You start caring about different things, but I don't know that desire goes away. It just changes. And I'm thinking about that. Where does that come from? And I read in Genesis that we were made in the image of God. And I look at God, and God is somebody, right? If anybody was ever anybody, it's God. God is somebody important. God is somebody special. God has always fit in within the Trinity. You just think about God, the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and in that Trinity, God is known fully and accurately within the community of the Trinity. There has always been harmony and unity and oneness with God. And so having been made in the image of God, I long for that in my life. Does that resonate with you? God enjoys that kind of fitting in within himself. For eternity past he has. I'm made in his image, and so I long for that. Again, I don't think that desire changes when we get older. It just migrates from genes to four-wheelers and to other things. I even see it, and then we'll get into the word here. But you look, and again, I'd love to do more of this study because this is something that's just becoming real to me. But I was remembering back, it's even in animals, right? We got 4 ducks one time when I was little. We went to some construction store, and they had a bunch of baby ducks, and I said, "Dad, ducks," And so we had a farm, a little hobby farm, so we put 4 ducks in this little box and brought them home, and named them all. The only one I can remember his name was Blacktop. It was a black duck. Well, we lived in a place where, the survival rate of animals is 50-50, and 3 of them didn't make it, and Blacktop did. And we also had a bunch of chickens. Blacktop didn't hang by himself and be a duck. As I'm a duck, he didn't be a duck and let the chickens be chickens. No, he was by himself, and he wanted community, he wanted friends, he wanted to fit in. So Blacktop migrated over to the chickens, and he became a chicken. He slept with the chickens, he ate with the chickens, he walked with the chickens, and eventually he just became, I think the chickens just accepted him. Even my duck wanted to fit in. Desire that, because we were created of the image of God, it's a healthy desire. But then with that, there's some strange things that I want to just spend a minute to see this morning. We're going to look at that in Jonah real quick. And you'll see why we're in Jonah when we're supposed to be looking at Jesus. You'll see this in just a second. In Jonah chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness is come up before me." But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa, found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare, went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So, and then you know the story in verse 17. Well, building up to verse 17, God hurls a storm. Literally, that's what the word is there. God hurls a storm into the sea. They have this conversation in the boat. They decide to throw Jonah over the boat. Jonah gets thrown over the boat. And in verse 17, it said, "Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. And then in chapter 2, you read of Jonah's prayer as he's there in the belly. In verse 10 of chapter 2, after 3 days and 3 nights of being in this great fish, it says, verse 10, chapter 2, "So the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land." Chapter 3, the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, "Why don't you go to Nineveh?" And this time, verse 3, it says, Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. If you've never been in a fish for 3 days and 3 nights, just share with you something that occurs when that happens. As many of us, I don't think, have had that experience. The acid, and in recent years, men have been in great fish and survived. Recently, not recently, I say it very loosely. Some time ago, there was fishermen that found a dog that had been in a fish for a significant period of time and lived. And there was some human over in Europe somewhere that had been found in a fish and lived. But what happens is, in this fish, the acid inside the fish eats away at your skin. And so the one gentleman in recent years that actually got swallowed by a fish, lived in the fish, and then survived, he came out with no eyebrows. He came out with no eyelashes. He had no hair anywhere on his body. His skin was entirely bleached, like white bleached, and with spots everywhere on his skin. Jonah lives in a country where people are not white, right? There's no blonde-haired white people out there. They're very dark. They're very black. And Jonah comes to Nineveh, and he looks very different from the people that he is coming to preach to. Right? You just imagine the story. There's this guy coming into your town who's not a part of your culture, your city, your country. And not only that, but he is entirely bleached from head to toe. He's got no hair anywhere on his body. He's got spots everywhere. Again, we're not told that happens, but we've seen in history that is what happens when you're in a fish. God could have done something entirely different. We don't know, but that is a possibility. What we see in Jonah, and then we'll show why this is important with Jesus, is Nineveh. You read that the whole city repented. You can go to chapter 3, verse 10. It says, "And then God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God relented from the disaster that he said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it." Two things we see in Jonah. One is Nineveh is the greatest revival recorded in history. Since the beginning of time to end of the time, Nineveh never has more people at one time come to faith in God. Greatest revival in history, and never in history has the messenger looked so very different from the people he was reaching out to. It's just two interesting facts of Jonah. Never has there been a bigger revival. Never has the messenger looked so different from the people he was trying to reach. Jonah didn't fit in with the people around him at all. And at least that's what I would presume. And that is also what I would presume is a huge factor in the revival that took place that day. Listen to this here, and then we'll go to Jesus. The people heeded Jonah's words because they were really listening, right? We talked last week about people who they're not talking, but they're not listening at the same time, right? People heeded Jonah's words because they were actually listening to what he said, and they heard Jonah speaking, or they were listening because they noticed him. And they noticed him because he looked very different from everybody else. Why is the story of Jonah important as we're looking at the strange things of Jesus? Because in Matthew chapter 12, you don't have to turn there, but in Matthew chapter 12, Jesus said to the people around him who were asking for a sign, he says, if you really want to get an idea of who I am, study the book of Jonah. And never in the Bible have we seen people turn to God like we see in Jonah. And Jonah looked so very different from the people that he was preaching to, and so did Jesus. Jesus didn't fit in at all. We just went through Christmas here a couple months ago, and you see the birthplace, right? Why was Jesus born in a stable? Because there was no room for him anywhere else, right? He didn't fit in. There was nowhere to fit. Jesus didn't fit in when he was born. What kind of people did they invite for the baby shower? Right? The baby shower. Who were the guests at the baby shower? They were shepherds. They were outcasts. They were people who, in that culture, they didn't fit in. In that culture, not today, but in that culture, shepherds were the low. They were the outcasts, and that's were the people that were invited for the baby shower, as it were. People who didn't fit in. Jesus' appearance, you read in Isaiah, he said there was nothing, even before Jesus came. Here's the thing, right? You're God. You're going to come to a place that you created full of people. You can look like whatever you want to look like. You can look how, you get to pick. You're God. But it says in Isaiah, hundreds of years before Jesus came, that he was going to be no special person in appearance. He picked that. He picked in his appearance. He didn't have a halo on his head. His followers were run-of-the-mill, despised, unnoticed people. He had a tax collector who was despised in that culture. He had the fishermen who were they were unnoticed, again, run-of-the-mill people. And then all the way to his death, you see Jesus hanging on a cross outside the city between a couple of thieves, right? Again, the Son of God, even in his death, it was humiliating, hanging between just ordinary crooks. He wasn't even hanging with guys who were important. They're just the Son of God, born in a no place and dying between ordinary thugs. Jesus was the one celebrity who never fit in here. And there's three things I want us to see this morning about Jesus so that we understand them about our life. Especially in light of the fact that what is normal and what is biblical is this desire to fit in. Okay, I'm arguing that the desire to fit in, the desire to be somebody, the desire to have oneness and community, to be known, to be noticed, I'm arguing that desire is not only the normal human experience, but it's a part of what it means to be created in the image of God. In light of that, it's so strange that Jesus would come and he wouldn't fit in here at all. Why not? The first thing, there's three reasons. The first is, maybe turn to John real quick before I give you this. Is John chapter 1. Says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is talking about Jesus. Because then you see in verse 14, it says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. So then you go back in verse 3, it says, all things were made through him. And without him, nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness. And how does the darkness respond? It doesn't comprehend it. It doesn't understand it. Here's the first thing. Jesus didn't fit in here. Why? Because he was a foreigner in every sense of the word to earth. Okay? Jesus was a foreigner in every sense of the word. He was not of this world. You see that later in John 17. He was not of this world. Jesus was the light of the world in a dark world. And therefore he didn't fit in, right? Light never fits in with dark. You don't mix. It's either light or it's dark, but they don't coexist into one unit. They're two separate. Jesus couldn't fit in because he wasn't a part of darkness. He was light. Jesus was sinless in a sinful place. Therefore you can't fit in. It's a square and a circle. They don't fit. Sinless and a place full of sin. He was the creator in a world full of created things. Everything here is created. Jesus is the creator. They don't fit, right? Number one, why didn't Jesus fit in? Because he couldn't. Okay, that's the first thing. He couldn't fit in here. Number two, he was secure in his identity with his heavenly Father. Why didn't Jesus fit in? Or why didn't Jesus try to fit in? Because he was secure in his identity with his heavenly Father. He already fit in where he wanted to fit in. Again, why didn't Jesus fit in here? Because he wasn't focused on fitting in here. Jesus already fit in where he wanted to fit in, which was in heaven. He was already somebody where it counted to be somebody. And number three, why didn't Jesus fit in here? Why didn't Jesus try to fit in here? Because fitting in would not have accomplished what he came to accomplish. Right? Jesus came to show people. I love it in John. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life. But it doesn't stop there, right? Everybody's got life. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life. But I came that your life might look so much different than what it looks like right now. I came that you might have life to the fullest. I came that you might have life abundantly, and you've got to see that in me first, and you're never going to see what I've come to accomplish. Jesus said, I came, so here's the reason. I came that you might have life, and then it might look so much different than everybody around you, but you wouldn't know that, and you wouldn't see that if I tried to fit in like one of you. You'd never see that I came to give you life different because I'm trying to fit in like everybody else. And man, we try so hard. We try so hard to do that. We try so hard to fit in with everybody else. There's an important distinction before we get to us I want you to see about Jesus. Here's where Christians often get on a very bad bunny trail. Okay? It's not that Jesus was focused on being different. Jesus wasn't trying to fit in, but neither was he trying to be different, right? If Jesus wanted to be different, very different, he could have come again with red hair or spiked purple hair, and he could have come with a third eye on the back of his head and two nose. He could have done whatever. He's God, right? You want to be different, have a couple of nose, an eye in the back of your head, and, whatever. 4 arms. You want to be different and get people's attention. You're God, you can do whatever he wants, but he didn't try to be different. His goal wasn't to be different, but neither was his goal fitting in. Here's the crux of the message. This is what I want you guys to leave with. His goal, Jesus' goal, was God's glory, period. And when you live for God's glory in a world full of people who don't live for God's glory, you're automatically going to be different. You're not going to fit in. Jesus wasn't trying to be different. So oftentimes that's what Christians think. I got to be different. I've got to focus on being different. But let me tell you what, Satan doesn't care what you focus on. If you focus on fitting in, good for Satan. If you focus on being different, Good for Satan, because neither person is focusing on glorifying God with their life. There are a lot of people who look different that aren't doing a thing for the kingdom of heaven. There are a lot of people who fit in that aren't doing a thing for the kingdom of heaven, right? Satan doesn't care what you focus on so long as it's not God and his glory. That's what Jesus was focused on, so automatically he didn't fit in here. There's an enemy. I'll just give you a reference before we close off with these three things looking at us. Maybe you want to spend some time reading John 17. Jesus, in that, it's a prayer. Jesus prays, and in that prayer, he prays not that God would take his disciples out of the world, but he prays that God would protect them from who? The evil one. He says, I don't pray that you take them out of the world. I pray that you protect them from the evil one. And church, Satan knows this desire that's within us. He knows our longing to fit in. He knows our longing to be somebody, to be noticed. And so he uses that against us to the fullest. I was at a foster care meeting this past week where the guy was talking about this, not in a biblical sense, but just in a cultural sense, and it struck a chord with me, which is then I took what I was thinking about to preach this week and I put it to the side because this was hitting home more for me. But he showed a video of this gal who walks into, and this is huge for our ladies in here this morning. This gal walks into a beauty salon kind of a place, and she looks like a very pretty ordinary girl, okay? But then she sits down and they're videotaping this whole thing, and then 4 or 5 different beauticians come and they make up her face all over the place, and they fix her hair up and then let it sit and then come back and straighten it out and refix it up and then let it sit and come back and straighten and refix it up. They do this like 4 or 5 times, and then so all of a sudden she doesn't look like the same girl that walked in. And then they put this fan up there, and then they blow this fan so her hair's blown all over the place, take a whole bunch of pictures, and then they take that picture of this girl they've just made super beautiful, and they put it on a Photoshop screen, and they spend hours making her neck longer, making her cheeks come in, changing the form of her eyebrows, and all of a sudden, then you see that final image on a billboard in some big city of a girl who doesn't even exist, advertising to other girls to buy whatever product she's selling. And you know what they're doing is they're trying to make these other girls feel like they're not enough. They're not pretty enough. They don't have enough. They're not enough. And so then they sell in to what this company is trying to buy. The idea of the culture, this guy was saying at this foster meeting, is to make people feel insecure in themselves so that they sell out to the culture. The guy said you go and they advertise on TV at the appropriate times for who's going to be watching. If it's moms who are at home, they talk about, are you lonely, or et cetera, et cetera. Here's sites that are going to help you out. The guy that was preaching said, I get emails twice a week from this hair company because they know I'm the age where I'm starting to lose hair, and they want me to feel insecure about my receding hairline. And so they're selling me these hair products. He said, leave my hair alone. The idea is to make you feel insecure about. And so I was listening to that, and I was thinking, man, Satan is doing that to us everywhere. He's trying to make us feel like we don't fit in, insecure, so that we sell out to the things that he wants us to get involved in, and we don't even have time to look at that today. Let's look at a couple of closing verses here. 1 John chapter 2. Right towards the end of your Bible. 1 John chapter 2. There's commands here for the Christian. Verse 15, 1 John chapter 2 says, do not love the world. This is what Satan is trying to get us to do. It says, do not love the world or the things in the world. Don't try to fit in, you might put in parentheses. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. and the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. Okay, there's that one. I encourage you to maybe commit that one to memory this week. Liz and I are trying to do that more. Now we're memorizing through the book of James together. And that's been exciting to do that as a husband and wife team. But I encourage you to maybe commit that one to memory. Romans also, here's the one more I want to leave you with. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, do not be conformed to this world. That so many things, don't try to fit in so hard. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We need to remember that the same thing that was true for Jesus is true for us today. We are his disciples, we are his church, we are his body. And so here's the three things that didn't allow for Jesus to fit in that we really need to capitalize as a church here, okay? Number one, we are not of this world. Wednesday Bible study this week, we're looking at this. We're talking about government and our relationship to government, our response to government as Christians. And one of the things that we see over and over in the Bible is that we are citizens of a different country. This is not our home. This is not our homeland. Hebrews said we seek a different homeland. Why should we not try so hard to fit in? Because like Jesus, we're foreigners. We should be able to fit in here. This is not our home. Number two, Jesus didn't try to fit in because he was already secure in his relationship with God. And here was an exciting thing for me this week. Church, you are already somebody. You think of it, right? God created this world, and we try so hard to fit in with other people, little people around the world. But the God that created the world says, I know you. I made you. I love you. I know everything about you. I'm crazy for you. I sent my son to die for you. You are already somebody. You already fit in where it matters. It says here, the world, in 1 John, the world is passing away. These people who I try so hard to fit in with, my boxer buddies, I don't know them anymore. You are already somebody. You already fit in. You don't need to try so hard to fit in with people who doesn't really matter whether you fit in or not. You are already known and loved. And this is a huge message for my age and teenagers, but this is not, there's no cap on this message, I'm convinced, when it comes to age. Finally, fitting, why should we not try so hard to fit in here? Because fitting in doesn't accomplish what we have been called to do. Jesus said in Matthew, Jesus said the first time, he said, I am the light of the world. But then he closes by saying, you are the light of the world. And nobody's going to see that light if you try so hard to fit in like everybody else. So I have this desire. God, what do I do with this? I have this desire to fit in. I have this desire to be somebody, and I feel like it's a good thing because I was created in your image. How do I deal with that? Jeremiah, take your eyes off of this place and look up here. And there you do fit in. There you are somebody. Here, you're not supposed to. You'll never, and if you try, you'll just only end up disappointed time and time and time again. Father in heaven, I thank you for Jesus. I thank you for his strangeness. That while I thank you for what his disciples probably had a hard time learning. These 12 guys who had such a desire to fit in with the world around them and following this unique individual who didn't seem to care at all what other people thought, because this wasn't his home, because he already was secure. He already felt like he fit in heaven, and because this wasn't what he came to accomplish. And I thank you for the disciples that got it later on and that lived their life in the same way. And I pray for the disciples that are sitting here in this church building this morning, that we would get it, and that people around might glorify God because they see us as different. We give you praise for that in Jesus' name.